This is Darth Matthew, host of the Star Wars Generations and Superhero Ethics podcast, and I find your lack of membership disturbing. You can free yourself from the ads of those rebel scum by going to theethicalpanda.com and clicking join for $5 a month, $55 a year. No more ads, only the episodes, just as the Emperor intended.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Star Wars Generations podcast. I'm joined by normal co-host Alex, along with special guest Pete Wright, to talk about Maul Shadow Lord, episodes 1 and 2. Folks, what do we think?
The first episode especially exceeded all my expectations. I really appreciated how, as a character, Maul is meant to be this kind of like menacing figure. And they give him throughout, I feel like a lot of the previous shows, not exactly, but a similar like Darth Vader treatment where they try to use his presence and his his aura as like as sparingly as possible. And I feel like they kind of stayed with that in this show. Like, it's about Maul, but he's not overpowered, so he maintains that mysterious, commanding presence.
Yeah, like just having that whole first fight scene, and he's barely there, and then he enters with one of the best needle drops I've seen in Star Wars of the Duel of the Fates music, which I don't think we've heard since Phantom Menace, have we? That's not like become his theme. And then all he does is just jump at one guy. That was
a big move
we've ever seen.
Well, it was a big move, and it showed just how capable his sort of recruits and minions are going to be throughout the show, because they didn't even need him to do the entire caper in the beginning. I thought that was very effective. Not the least of which, I want to start from my head at the very beginning. The evolution of the art style on this thing, I don't know how much you guys have talked about that in your past episode, but the art style on this is extraordinary, and it has really landed well on me as the sort of new canon for how we're seeing Star Wars animation. That entire opening caper was, I just thought, so beautifully conceptualized, and the fact that Maul didn't need to be even a part of it was just icing on the cake.
Who was part of his team and in season 7 of the Clone Wars when he during the Siege of Mandalore and all that, and as well as a lot of other great people, the two I keep wanting to call them Dothraki, the two Dathmiri, this great team, and of course Spybot, who Aaron was one of Aaron's favorites, and we'll be talking about more. But you're right, the animation style, and I'm not someone who notices that as much as others because I just don't have that kind of visual eye, but even I could tell it has just kept getting better and better. And, the Bad Batch was a significant step above the Clone Wars and Rebels, although they did the whitening of the Bad Batch, which wasn't great. But other than that, there was so much good to be enjoyed there. And this just seems, again, like they're just pushing the envelope every single time we go back to Star Wars animation.
I mean, I've noticed it right off the bat, even in the trailer, because like the way that
super
when
cinematic.
He swings the lightsaber, the trail of like the white beam, and just like it almost feels like, I don't know, like it's just like they're painting as the characters move. It's like more realistic, more detailed, more depth to it, but also just like this artistic, like paint stroke style of animation that's just like really brings it to life even more. And that's just in the details. I mean, the actual, like, I don't actually know what planet we're on. I thought it was Coruscant, but I don't think it's actually Coruscant.
Yeah, it's Janix is the planet. And they mentioned at the very beginning, I definitely thought it was Coruscant for a long while too, but that's part of why they're saying we're not sure if we're going to get the Empire involved. I think it's kind of like, the planet we saw on Andor at the beginning.
Yeah, that's why I was at first, because when the very beginning of the episode, like you see the little circle rings, like, oh, it's Coruscant. It's a classic Coruscant light pattern. But obviously the Empire is not very heavily present there. It's not that. I don't know. Point is that city design was incredible.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. It definitely gives that kind of underworld feel, that feeling of like, so much is going on here. And can we just talk about how much they were pulling on the tropes of 90s and like 2000s cop movies? Because we've got, first of all, the DILF cop who has a son being called Lawson is a little bit on the nose, I thought. But did you notice like the basically pizza boxes, except with one of their corners cut off, that were sitting in their apartment? And that first shot of the cops who are starting to chase Maul, where they're eating out of what looked like basically Chinese food containers, like the white, cartons that you get. they're very much being this is like a The Wire or some kind of like mob movie, cop movie kind of thing.
Well, it's Blade Runner, like it is, and that's really where we go for the sort of noir space cop piece, working with Two Boots, the assistant, the able assistant who's just kind of always on the case. It's Seven, right? It has very much a grit and sort of sadness to it, and I know that's also partly influenced by Janix itself, right? This planet is independent from the Empire, right? We know that they tell us, don't get the Empire involved at all, because that implies the Empire is not there. It is held together by these uneasy truces between crime syndicates. It is really it is an incredibly smart place for Maul to sort of seed his revolution, because there's no Imperial oversight, and I think the resistance to call in the Empire is probably about protecting that independence, not just jurisdiction. And that puts our central characters at a state of conflict right away in the first 38 minute, right? Whatever episode 1 was. I think the world building is really great for this show. It's off to a better start, I think, than The Bad Batch was, at this point.
I'll admit I love the start of The Bad Batch, but I hear what you're saying, and I fully agree. I fully agree in terms of how good the world building is, because for me, with a show like this, yes, I care about Maul. Yes, I want the individual story, but I want that kind of thing where, I don't want a documentary about what's happening there. Well, actually, I do, but most of us don't. But of what's happening as the Empire takes more and more control. But I love getting to learn more about that. And we saw some of that in Andor. A lot of that's much further along. Here, we're getting to see the early days when the Empire hasn't fully taken over, but is definitely trying to. And, I'm kind of curious, has it always been this kind of situation where the different crime bosses are there? Is that a situation that the Empire is kind of intentionally allowing, or maybe even encouraging, so that people can say, oh my God, it's so out of control, we need the Empire to come in and take over?
It's actually one of the questions I had for you guys who've been talking about all these shows at such depth, because I'm so glad you name dropped Andor, because the show is being so favorably kind of compared to Andor in terms of its willingness to let crime politics kind of breathe in these first 2 episodes. I'm curious your thoughts on just how much the Star Wars small screen canon has been influenced, or is being influenced by what Andor delivered to us, which was tonally radically different than anything we'd seen before.
I mean, I feel like to your earlier point, Matthew, I feel like it is very like a lot of the tropes of like classic kind of cop. I also like Blade Runner came to mind as well for me, Pete, when I was watching it.
Yeah.
But I do think that like as far as like the realm of Andor, that Lucasfilm saw a lot of success in this like era of lawlessness, and people are really drawn to those types of stories. And that's why I think also The Mandalorian is so successful. Like all of these stories that have been so successful for Star Wars have in common this period of the Empire is, it's here, it's very much in control, but it's still trying to gain more control. And it allows for these underworld crime and these rebellions to form. And they all kind of play their own role in the larger universe of like how eventually the Empire crumbles and falls from all these different different factors trying to break it apart or trying to stake their own claim in it. And I think this show is really going to give us this look of, Maul really wants to sow chaos and take control of these syndicates. And just like he said it in the second episode, he wants to take out Sidious, but he wants to weaken his control and his power. And I think the best way to do that, in Maul's mind, is to, sow chaos, thrive in the chaos, and like make his own little criminal empire to grow it from there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would really agree with that. And I think it is definitely very Andor inspired. And I'll say, I think it's very Acolyte inspired, and that there was obviously so much debate over that show, and a kind of, the internet perspective was that everybody hated that show. And like a lot of other things, it's now like more and more people are coming like, no, the algorithm wasn't showing you my comments, but we loved this show.
Yeah.
And I think it really is the mix of those two, because the focus on the villain, the focus on the dark side, and like in the Acolyte, having a Jedi Master who I don't think was as bad as the one in the Acolyte, but still is putting their Padawan in a position where the Padawan is starting to really doubt that this person has their best interests in mind, is really starting to wonder, like, is being part of the Jedi kind of a ridiculous idea? And I think that's making them very vulnerable towards Maul. And so, yeah, I think it really is kind of a melding of those two, pushing the villain-focused storytelling and pushing the darkness, the grittiness, the underworld, particularly in the time when the Jedi are no longer there. It makes sense that the Jedi's not there, the Republic's not there, the trains aren't running on time. I love to use that, that quote from Mussolini of fascism flourishes in and often will intentionally create times of chaos so that people are like, well, I miss having some of the freedoms, but now the trains run on time. Now the trash is getting collected. Now I'm not afraid to walk down the street. The way you probably didn't need to be, actually, but the propaganda made you feel that way. And so, yeah, I think it's kind of blending all of that in this really great way, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how that happens.
There's a sort of secondary question in here, which I feel like is a little bit missing, which is I'm excited about, but I'm curious the way it'll stand up, which is to what degree are we still fascinated by Maul as a character? It feels like a character that until sort of Filoni, we really didn't have anybody who could commit to the complexity of Darth Maul on screen. And that is the lingering question that I have. Is Maul enough to be the title character over the next 8 episodes to follow?
I think heavily yes.
Yeah,
I was
glad
actually thinking
to
as I
hear
watched
that.
the show that I think Maul has solidified himself partially due to Filoni's writing and Sam Witwer's performance as one of the greatest villains in not just Star Wars but science fiction. I think that when he jumped on the screen in Phantom Menace, I remember as a kid being like, "Who the hell is this devilish looking Sith Lord?" He was so badass looking, and I think it's just since then they've crafted this super crazy, chaotic narrative that fits his personality. And like, he just has found ways to like flourish in these chaotic pockets. And like, he's mysterious enough where there's so much we don't know about him. And I always want, like, every time I see him, I want more of him. Even though I already know like how his story ends and how his story begins. I mean, more or less. I want to know everything in between. Like, I feel like I could have, they already said that, I believe it's the first Star Wars show ever that's been renewed for a second season before the first season even aired. So we're getting another 8 episodes after this, according to Lucasfilm already. And I think it could go on for a few more seasons, honestly, and I'd be happy with it.
I think so too.
I am nervously optimistic. And because I think you're right. I think there's so much to his story to tell. I think part of it is that he was actually a really popular character in the Legends books that I didn't really know much about. Pete, I don't know how much you had read those. But we actually did an episode with Jonah Kellman a couple weeks ago about that. And so I think that was where part of the interest came. Because after Phantom Menace, I think a lot of people were just like, well, he's dead, it's gone. And he was cool, but there's nothing there. And I think part of that's because Ray Park's performance. Ray Park was a phenomenal physical combat guy. I don't think his acting really made the character something interesting. Sam Witwer obviously has just basically reinvented the character in a fairly different way, but a fascinating one. My caution is because I've talked before about the problems with prequels, and I think Maul is doing something even harder, which is it's the problem of being the middle chapter when we already know the beginning and we already know the end.
Yes.
Because, we've seen him in the Clone Wars, and we know where he was at the end of that, and we know where he winds up in Rebels, which is, among other things, still very desperate to have a apprentice because it hasn't worked up until now. So, and I know this is a controversial topic. A lot of people liked Kenobi a lot more than I did. But part of why I felt like Kenobi didn't work for me and for a lot of other people is that, we'd had the epic fight between Obi-Wan and Vader at the end of Revenge of the Sith. And then we have in A New Hope, it's the last time we met, I was you were the master, and now, et cetera. I'm misquoting it, but in A New Hope. And then so fitting this into the middle, it felt like it kind of changed that, how did it fit? And so I'm a bit nervous that by the time that where he ends in Rebels means that there's too much he can grow. But I do think that there's a lot more space than was with Kenobi. And I'm so far, especially if they kind of keep him somewhat in the background and it be a lot about the cop and it be a lot about these two Jedi and the Master and Padawan who are on the run, and it be about these crime things, with Maul being like the overarching character, but not necessarily the guy who has the most screen time. I think that's going to be that's a way to avoid this problem.
I think you're right.
I am a Kenobi lover.
Yeah,
that's fair. That's fair.
I am too. I'm on Team Alex. I was a Kenobi lover, but I think the sandwich prequel warning is important because in episode 2 they drop the Darth Sidious line, so we know there's going to be some intention in this first season. They've already hung a lantern on it. He's going to be working toward, hopefully, some sort of appearance, either in spirit, in name, in presence, to that relationship. But we know how that relationship ends too. Like, we know where that character ends up too. And I think it is extraordinarily challenging when you think about what the writers are trying to do. The writers are writing themselves into tiny little boxes. And as a cultural experiment, as a creative experiment, I'm fascinated by how they are going to write themselves out of it, because I can't see it. That makes the show both much more interesting to watch than I expected it, and also dramatically more anxiety producing.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll say again, something I think that's very intentional is that right now, except for the Pikes who appear towards the end of episode 2, most of this is local crime lords. We're not dealing with Black Sun yet. We're not dealing with some of these other groups. And I think most importantly, the words Crimson Dawn have not yet been spoken, because spoilers for movies that are 10 years old, we know that by Solo, which is basically the next time Maul will show up in canon after this period, and Solo's about 8 years into the Empire. This is like 2 or 3 years into the Empire. We know that by that point, he's the head of Crimson Dawn. And so that's kind of the next point he has to get to. I think you're going to have to really keep Crimson Dawn in the background, maybe till the end of this season or maybe even next season. Because if he becomes the head of Crimson Dawn in episode 3, then there's really nowhere for him to go. So
didn't they mention, or maybe they didn't mention? Thought they mentioned Crimson Dawn when the Lawson had that meeting with the woman. She was like talking about the Shadow Collective. Didn't she mention Crimson Dawn as one of the syndicates that he like formally ruled?
Yeah, you're right. So they may have name dropped in that regard, but there's been neither one of these two crime local bosses are part of Crimson Dawn.
Right.
The Pikes are the only group that's shown up so far.
Right. Well, do we think that obviously we know in Solo that eventually becomes the leader of Crimson Dawn again, but at this current point, do you think his goal right now is to recombine all of them? Or to me, it feels like he's kind of trying to destroy a lot of the competition just so then he could assume the mantle, I guess, of Crimson Dawn, and a lot of the other crime families are out of the picture, kind of? Because it doesn't seem like his plan is, rejoin everyone. It's burn everything to the ground, and then he rules the ashes and rebuilds with, the Mandalorians. It would be his plan, I guess.
That feels like an in-character motivation that is clear to me. I can absolutely see how that would be something that would be in Maul's original character design, to actually rebuild from ashes something completely bespoke to him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of a Maul vibe check, that feels on the mark.
And I think there's an extent to which Maul is playing checkers, not chess. Maul really wants people to think he's playing chess, and on some level he is. But
it's really very simple.
That Aaron and I talked about last week. That Aaron and I talked about in our last episode a couple of days ago. He right now has 3 fundamental goals. He wants to get revenge on all the people who wronged him. He wants to build something towards challenging Sidious and maybe eventually taking over and either becoming Sith again or wiping out the Sith and starting a new dark side. and he wants to become the head of something like Crimson Dawn. And I think we're already starting to see those three goals might not always be in alignment, and it might, to some extent, come into conflict with each other. And I think part of the story is going to be people like Rook and the others who are following him getting a little frustrated if there's like one path that's really established Crimson Dawn, and in part by allying with someone who screwed him over, and the other path is kill someone who screwed him over, and he's like revenge first, and they're like, no. So I think that's gonna be a really interesting part of his character development. Is he's very good at chess, but he really wants to play checkers. He really wants to flip the board sometimes, and I think it's gonna be really fun to see.
I think he's playing Monopoly.
Okay, there we go.
I mean, maybe you talked about this with Aaron, Matthew, but I at no point has it been like hard confirmed that Rook is the armorer, but I feel like this, I don't know, the more I watch her character with Maul and hear the voice, the more I feel like that is where this is going. Unless it was confirmed at some point that I don't remember. I feel like there's been a fan theory for a while, but I feel like that could be confirmed by the end of the Maul series.
I kind of don't want that because that makes the universe feel smaller than I think it should be.
But
and I've always gotten the sense that the armor in her group is kind of an offshoot that has been somewhat inspired by the things that in the past inspired the people who become Death Watch. Not that it's a direct connection to Death Watch, but I'm not sure.
I don't know. The reason I say that, though, is bit like you think about the armor and a lot of the other kind of Mandalorians, like they have the Maul horns on some of their helmets still. Like they're clearly some remnant left over from Death Watch. They like when Bo-Katan enters and they say that Dan is a child of the Watch. They're like, he's Death Watch. So like to me, it feels like it all points back to Death Watch and that she was part of it. And if she's a leader now. I don't know. I just feel like all the signs point directly to that. And to me, it doesn't make it feel as like I get that's a general complaint of Star Wars is like the world feels smaller. But like to me, that would just make a lot of sense and would kind of keep the Death Watch line a little easier to understand. Because why else? Where else would like this mystic leader come from that it doesn't exist in all the previous content, who is now ruling the remnants of Death Watch, and why would they follow her? It makes more sense if she was already in a position of power. I don't know. To me, it just feels like that's what they're kind of teeing off towards.
Pete,
I was reading about it earlier too. So
that's one where I don't know because I think I'm so firmly on the line of that complaint about the world being too small in Star Wars. And so it's hard for me to imagine because I'm not sure I want it. I like the idea, especially after the fall of Mandalore. I like the idea of the fractious relationship between Mandalorian groups to be or like exaggerated. And it makes me want them not to bring us back to a known quantity, but to give us, more fuel for future spin-off stories. And to that same thing, like I think we have to address like the Star Wars legacy connection, the original sort of George Lucas connection. Like, who is Devin? Is this a Darth Talon knockoff? And it feels like the consensus is that's what we've got. But does that make the world bigger or smaller?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I definitely hear what you're saying, Alex. I think it is certainly a possibility. I'm not going to rage quit watching by any means, if it is. I think, and we talked about this a lot during our coverage of the last season of Mandalorian. I'm kind of invested in this idea of a Mandalorian diaspora, and that like these different isolated groups have each been doing their own thing as beliefs are passed down and evolving. And so I think to me, I really prefer the idea that Death Watch and the Watch have a common ancestor, that like both of them can trace their roots to another group a couple, 6 to 10 generations back, but that they haven't been having direct contact. But it's certainly possible. Talking about though another group that is kind of in diaspora world of being disconnected from their roots and off on their own. Let's talk about the Jedi that we have, the former Jedi. My transitions are a little obvious, but I try to like help guide us along. And I'm going to start with some feedback. Actually, we got one of our listeners named Jamie wrote in, and Jamie wrote, "Love the pod, and I'm so excited to hear what you have to say after each pair of episodes. I gotta say, I was so angry at Master Iko Diodaki. telling Devon they have to beg, letting her be arrested, saving the bridge I can understand, but there's like a hyphen between them. So I think those two they can't understand. But then saying, saving the bridge I can understand, but I can see how all of it adds up to make Devon a lot more vulnerable to Maul than either Ahsoka or Ezra were. He's looking for Lawson at the end of the episode. Do you think he'll get more involved?
Where do we get the name of the Master Jedi?
It's in the episode.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, this person wrote it into me, which is great. But I double checked. It's in like the credits and stuff like
Yes.
that.
Oh, I was like, I do not remember seeing a name. Or
It was not said as far as I can tell.
Iko Diodati. Fascinating.
Yeah, Iko Diodaki.
Daki, yeah.
I mean, I won't lie. That was one of my only complaints about the series so far. Was it did like at least like the very beginning felt a little like on the nose hokey, like Padawan a little disgruntled. Like we got to get food, and then the Jedi's like we can't interfere, and then like interferes again anyway later, kind of on his own whenever he wants, but like doesn't listen to his younger female apprentice. I don't. It just felt like very on the nose for like what a Jedi would do, and like the fact that like she ended up in Maul's clutches because she stole something and got caught. It felt a little hokey. That's the one part that felt a little hokey. Like they kind of had to get her in the right place. But like I don't know, the dude feels like I don't have any connection to him yet, so I can't make a full decision about him. But he does feel like his movements are a little weird. Like his decision making is a little weird to me.
He's an interesting character. He's kind of that, you get some obvious Yoda vibes, also a little Henry the Turtle, and like he's got a really interesting character design. I'm right with you though, Alex. Like I don't have a connection with him, and so far everything has been deeply predictable, right?
Yes.
Like you stand to the side when some things happen, but the bridge falls and we're right in the way. We're protecting our Padawan, trying to get her back when she has been kidnapped. And there's the whole, okay, Maul brings down the bridge, so our Jedi goes and saves the bridge. The absolute tropiest distraction for a Jedi is pull down a bridge or do something to the public. All right, I mean, I get all that. But what I think is interesting is the way the usual sort of parental relationship between Jedi and Padawan is fractured because of the way the Jedi have been forced into the shadows, right? It's not just Hayden Christensen being kind of snotty. It's
right.
This is frustrating because Devon Izara knows that they have more power that they could be using to survive, and they're being told not to do it in a time of great strife. That conflict is fascinating to me, and I hope they don't make it too easy for Devon to discover this outlet to use their power for greater,
right,
progress, when I feel like there should be a real struggle there. And so far, it feels a little easy, but I'm open.
I think I see it a little bit differently. I definitely agree with the tropey. I feel like they're painting with broad brushstrokes, and that if the story was focused on them, I would want a lot more detail and a lot more depth. I do think the bridge thing, it's definitely a trope, but it's one that we've specifically seen Maul do before.
Yes.
In Clone Wars, one of the way Maul tells his brother Savage, like the way we get the Jedi attention is by harming innocents, and he talks about their empathy as being a weakness, and this idea that Master Daki is going to save these like random 8 people on a bridge instead of his own apprentice is something that Maul exactly knows. And so, it is tropey, but I also think it really fits the character. I think for me, the thing that really made it work was the way all that story is paired with then how Maul is kind of like needling her. She keeps saying, I want to be let go. And him saying, I'm disturbed by your lack of perspective, and you can leave whenever you want. Because to me, you're right. It's a little easy. But that whole story to me is she's internalized enough of this from her master, that she doesn't think in terms of the powers that she can use. And she thinks, I'm in a prison, instead of thinking, wait, I'm a Jedi. This isn't a real prison. I can get out anytime I want.
Right.
I guess it just feels very similar to the tactic he used with Ezra. So to me, it just feels like Maul is using the same. And I understand he tried Ezra later in the timeline, but I guess it like Maul, and that's part of Maul's failing as a character. Not like he still was like failing like in the story in the actual universe of like one of his weaknesses is he keeps trying the same thing with trying to get a Padawan, trying to find that connection that he never had because he kept being cast aside. And so he tries to manipulate people to like be with him. And maybe in the grand scheme of the story, he succeeds here. I mean, I think we kind of know he succeeds with her eventually. And then like he thinks he can succeed again with Ezra. And that like actually maybe deepens Ezra's character indirectly because he was able to resist it. I don't know. Maybe when this is all over, maybe it ends up making multiple characters even stronger. Just at this current moment, I feel like it's similar to what he's done in the past. And so I'm curious how it's going to differ eventually.
Right. I mean, to me, if it does work with her somewhat, it would then make sense that he would try it with Ezra. And that might be the place where the sandwich prequel actually kind of works. But I do hear the...
Yeah. And then in that case, it would impress me more than Ezra resisted it because Maul succeeded in the past with it. So no, maybe Filoni's playing 4D chess here, Matthew. I don't know.
Well, and part of it to me is also, I see such a difference between Master Daki and Kanan Jarrus. You know, in that Kanan kind of Daki is someone who's trying to really hold on to the ideals after the Jedi have fallen. Granted, he was already a master. Jarrus was a Padawan, but Jarrus kind of walks away from it all for a while. And you know, in the novel that we talked about, I can't remember the name of it offhand, but I'll make sure that there's a link in the show notes.
One with Hera.
Yeah, exactly. Where him and Hera meet, and Hera kind of pulls him back into being a Jedi. Yeah. And so I think, to me, I'm hopeful this is 4D chess. It is possible that like Maul, Filoni's trying to play 4D chess and is actually playing checkers. So we'll just kind of have to see.
This is the first show that's been released since Filoni took over as the full-on president, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A lot of money riding on this, Dave.
Yep. The last thing I'll say about this, and we can move on to other things, is either this is an insight I have or I'm totally projecting. But as someone who's studied religious movements a lot, one thing I've always been interested in is what happens to the believers in a religious group or a cult or whatever you want to say when it all falls apart. You know, what happens to the people after Jonestown who were the ones who didn't take the poison, or after Waco or something like that. And I think seeing Daki trying so hard to kind of act like everything is normal and that he's still going to uphold the Jedi strictures, even though that whole world is gone, even though there is no one to feed him anymore, it rings very true to me. It might be painted in broad brushes, but it feels very accurate that like Kanan Jarrus would go one way and Obi-Wan would go another, and someone else would go this way that Daki is going.
Yeah, I think all of those points tie directly back to, your comment, a lot of money riding on this, Dave. I feel like we should put that on a hat. If for no other reason than to indicate that all of this feels strangely like a new beginning for so many of these characters, and what kind of cognitive dissonance that is, that it's actually a new beginning to a thing we already know how it ends, to call back our previous point. But by and large, I think so far I had a ball with these first two episodes, and it scratched a real need for me to see this kind of animation and this kind of animated storytelling from the team. I'm thrilled with it. And I have to say, I do love the Gideon. So Gideon, what's her name? Gideon Adlon plays Devon, Izara. And in the second episode, her mom is a legendary voice actor, Pamela Adlon. She plays the informant that gives up information on where to find on Gideon in that episode. So we had a nice little mom-daughter casting that I thought was really, really delightful. Checkers.
I love it.
Checkers.
I love it.
Yeah. Checkers.
Let's talk about what is, I think, many people's favorite character. Certainly was Aaron's. And we again have some feedback here. And the fact that the feedback comes from Chopper Fangirl may tell you the direction we're going. Chopper Fangirl writes in, I'm so glad Aaron talked about Spybot. He's my favorite character so far. Although, as Aaron pointed out, we have no idea what Spybot's gender or pronouns are. But we'll use, she writes in he. Is he what Chopper would be if he went to the dark side? Do you think Spybot was designed like that, or is he so maniacal due to a reprogramming error like K2SO was?
I don't know.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know. I thought the droid was goofy.
I feel like it's a programming thing. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like it was goofy. It's like, did Spybot turn into a villain, sort of a villain arc, just because it was like a bad day on an engineering desk somewhere, and it was just the wrong hero showed up at the wrong time? I don't know, but it sort of falls into one of the grand tropes of Star Wars animation, is that all of the principal characters tend to be very played very straight, and then when you get the soldiers, they scream a lot and yell things like, come on, we gotta get him, like really kind of bland excited language. And Spybot's kind of right down the middle, because it's all like groans and whistles, but with more vocalization than I feel like we have from other non straight up droid bots. And yet I still find it it was a utility player for me. I think it's cute. I did not attach to it.
I think my only take on it was I did enjoy the foil between the what's his name?
Chewboot. Him and Spybot and Chewboot.
No, Spybot. That's what. Yeah.
Chewboot.
So Chewboot and Spybot together, I thought was kind of funny because they were so like Chewboot. Is it Chew or Two?
Two. Well,
I'm so happy
if
it's
you
not
notice,
Chewboot. I thought it was
wearing
Chewboot.
he's a droid who wears boots.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I think that the foil between the two of them was funny.
Checkers,
like,
man.
It's so like straight and narrow, like follows all the rules. Like, we have to report to the Empire. I don't drink calf. I just am sharing this moment with you. And then Spybot is like this little maniacal, like, yes, fight, kill each other, fight. And so when they interact with each other, I'm like, all right, that's kind of funny.
Yeah. I think that's kind of where I am. I do know that in the Legends canon, they told us that Maul designed the spy droids that he has in the Phantom Menace. So it is certainly possible that he also designed Spybot. But I like the idea that Spybot kind of went the realm of either he went the realm of K2SO, or he went the direction that Chopper would have gone if he didn't have Hera to be like, whoa, buddy, you
Relax,
have a little bit of war crimes as a treat, but not quite so much war crime.
Right. War crimes is a treat.
Hey, we've got our episode title now. There we go. So, well, thank you, both Chopper Fangirl and Jamie. Of course, please keep writing in with your thoughts. You can all the ways to contact us are in the show notes. Please take a look at that. Any of the last things you guys want to touch on or cover, or questions we want to dive into, or characters or moments you want to lift up?
Well, I just want to say I'm curious from your perspective, knowing what you know about canon, about upcoming episodes. The episode titles, the chapter titles, Whispers in the Unknown, Chapter 3, and Pride and Vengeance, Chapter 4. That's what's coming in our next pair. Pride and Vengeance. Does any of that give you... I feel like we're going to Babe Ruth it. I would like you to call the shots. What happens next?
I will say that Pride and Vengeance is where we get into what is Maul's real goal, and the goals coming into conflict. And I'll even directly call the shot of saying there's going to be some kind of conflict with Rook, where Rook is like, our goal should be to take over and win. There's a great line from West Wing of where it's saying, like, I want to win, you want to beat the other guy. And that those are two different goals. Yeah. And sometimes when you're focused on beating the other guy, which, by the way, is kind of definition of the dark side, like, do you fight against what you hate, or do you fight to protect what you love? So to me, that's what Pride and Vengeance is going to be about, is going to be Maul caught on that and maybe having some conflict with Rook. But
would be the most interesting narrative flex, because he already said in episode 2 to Devon, you and I are on the same side. Right? that sets up this entire 10-episode universe as being vastly more complex than we've seen either before or after, which may make it interesting.
But I would just say that I do feel like, again, like Maul. This is why I don't think Maul will ever get tiring for me, because he's predictable but also unpredictable. Like, he's predictable in the note that, like, he has said to Ezra, to Ahsoka, to Devin, to like everyone he tries to make a Padawan of, we're on the same side. We have the same goal. We have the same enemy.
Yeah.
Because I genuinely believe that while Maul is chaotic and believes he should rule, he also believes that that is actually the right thing for, like, the universe. He believes that, like, the universe would be better off if he, you know.
Yeah, he still thinks he's the hero of his story.
Correct. That's what
the
I'm
way
trying to
that
say.
Darth
Thank you,
Sidious does.
Yes. And so I think that, like, then that gets in, and that hubris is what gets in his own way half the time.
Yeah.
And so to me, like,
and it's
I think
sad for us to watch.
right, it's so much fun to watch.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, because it's not
right.
just hubris, he is a literal Cassandra. He knows the truth. Everything he said to Ahsoka about Sidious taking over, he was right. Everything he says to Ezra and then later to Obi-Wan, he's right.
what does Cassandra mean?
The
Cassandra
Aaron
complex
didn't know either.
is...
You guys really need to study Greek mythology more.
I studied Greek mythology
right.
very thoroughly. I just have not heard this one.
So Cassandra is
the Cassandra complex. She was she knew the future, but she was cursed because no one that she told would ever believe her, and she ended up going insane, and it was very, very sad.
So yeah, which is what's happening in Maul, is that he knows the future, but he wants to get really murdery about it, and so no one pays attention to him.
He wants to get really murdery about it.
You know.
So really, what we're talking about is methods. It's a methods problem.
Yeah.
And to answer your original question, Pete, I feel like whispers.
Yeah.
It's whispers into the unknown. To
Yes,
me, that
whispers
feels
in the
very
unknown.
like mystical, and like that might be more of a focus on Devin or like the Jedi, and like maybe give us a little more insight into like Devin's headspace, of like, you know, what was her upbringing, what was her, because like we end episode 2 with like this very pensive look as she like exits the jail she's escaped from, and she kind of has this choice now, like, does she try and go back to her Jedi master? Does she try and go off on her own? Does she join Maul? There's a lot of options in front of her, and to me it's gonna be an episode where we learn more about her and like what her deal is, what's her mindset, what's her story. I do feel, y'all, in very classic Filoni fashion, we are gonna get another Order 66 flashback to see how she survived. I mean, literally, Rook asked the question point blank, how did she survive?
Yeah.
And Walt's like, we're going to find out. And I feel like every new Star Wars thing that comes out, we see Order 66 from a new aim. And don't get me wrong, there's been no bad depiction of it, and I do enjoy like getting a little more pieces together. But at a certain point, I'm like, all right, like I've seen the Jedi die too many times, bro. Stop traumatizing me.
I have to say, I have this image now that is somewhat affected by my love of 80s sci-fi and the movies that imprinted on me. Because in A New Hope, which is from the 70s, but you'll see where I'm going in a second, you know, there's that member of the Empire military, I don't remember if this particular guy is a general or an admiral, I think he's Admiral Modi, but I could be wrong, who challenges Darth Vader and talks about, you know, your sad devotion to that ancient religion and you know, your sorcerer's ways. And they talk about this as though the Jedi have been gone for generations. And I feel like if you think about the movie Back to the Future, where one of the things that happens is as they change the past, not Alex P. Keaton, but the Michael J. Fox character's name I forget, is holding a picture of his parents and his brothers and sisters, and they're fading. As the longer he spends in the past, changing that. And to me, I have this image of that Modi saying that, if it is Modi, whoever the character is, it's fading Back to the Future style. And Filoni is furiously helping that along because he just wants to, he keeps adding more and more people who are using this ancient religion closer and closer to the time that the guy says it. Where like, you know, like these people know about laser swords. Like there's, I don't mind it,
but from a distant memory.
I would say there's collective memory, and also I'm with you, Matthew, but I do think that at least so far they've done at least a serviceable job at keeping me in a state of like what's the word I'm looking for? Like plausible deniability. Like, I mean, like even the captain was like laser sword, doesn't call it a lightsaber. Like, haven't seen it since the Clone Wars. Like, it feels like you can't no matter what Palpatine does, he can't fully erase the Jedi from the collective memory. But it like to a lot of people, by the time that New Hope happens, it's been 20 years. It feels ancient. Like something happened to me 20 years ago feels very ancient. But like there's still a little bit of a faded memory there of like events from that time. And so I feel like that doesn't bother me as much as long as it continues to be isolated events that like people could be like, oh, that was kind of weird, but like maybe doesn't put it all together. Because I don't, if you think something's extinct, like if I said to you, Matthew, we're out on a hike together and you and I saw a dodo bird, you would never believe it was a dodo bird because you have been told they are extinct. They do not longer exist. You'd be like, oh, It's just a weird looking bird.
But I don't have a memory of seeing one. I think for someone your age, 20 years ago may seem ancient. For people
I was 9, yeah.
Not so much. I remember the Iraq War pretty well. I remember Barack Obama's speech was literally 20 years ago at that Democratic convention. And I just want to be clear. I'm no longer complaining about this. I am now having fun with it. I'm now like, it's all, it started with the movies. It's all ridiculous now. Filoni is just having fun with it. And and honestly, it's Filoni's world and we're all living in it. And I'm okay with that.
20 years ago, I never thought I'd get another Star Wars movie again. I am so happy that I'm getting all of this to have fun with and enjoy. And even if some of it's a little on the nose. And the last thing I want to say about the 2 episodes, the one more thing that I wrote down that I thought was a little like, okay, we need to let this trope die, is they gave Maul another hallway scene.
Yeah.
For the love of God. It was amazing when Vader did in Rogue One. It was incredible when they harkened back to it for Luke in Mandalorian. Stop. Just stop there. Even the one, I was like, okay, when Maul did it in the last season of Clone Wars, I was like, okay, like, this is still kind of cool. I think we're reaching the end. Now it's the same character doing it again. Come on, y'all. The hallway's badass. It's over now.
Yeah. I felt that way. I also
harsh words for hallway scenes.
Kind of homage to 80s and 90s cops and robbers movies. There was enough car chases. I'm done with car chases in the show.
And there's going to be, at least from what, unless they change it from what the little scene they gave us, the Star Wars Celebration last year, there's going to be a fucking hallway scene for Mando in the new movie. But they just keep using hallway scenes over and over again.
Yeah. Bigger hallway.
Bigger hallway. Wider hallway, maybe. better
wider,
fight
taller
back
hallway.
In the hallway.
There's like a dinosaur in it.
I can't remember what it was, but literally in the last couple months, there was some action movie or something like that where I complained about how the character got a hallway scene and did not need one. And it was ridiculous, but I don't even know what it was.
The thing I keep thinking about, speaking of just collective memory, is that what happens when, what's the detective's name?
Lawson.
Lawson. When Lawson suddenly remembers the last time he saw a laser sword, and it's the flashback is actually from the General Grievous fight on Upatau, and it turns out he was there, like he was a soldier in the Clone Wars, because his age would be about right, right? And his memory is fallible. Right. I think that would be. This is one of those sort of retcon things that can be frustrating, but again, it's all about how well Filoni plays the hits. I don't have the same opinion as you guys about hallway scenes. I actually love hallway scenes from the first time I saw one in Old Boy. Like, I love a good hallway scene, and I think that that there is a way to orchestrate and block and design great action beats that we've seen before in a new way, and I am here for it.
Yes, Pete. But it has to be what you just said.
Yeah.
It has to be well blocked.
Yeah.
Like, to me, like, this is just like, Maul's already done one. The one in the Clone Wars I thought was better. I just like, it almost felt like shot for shot, like, open fire, like it was Rogue One again.
Yeah,
like it just felt too.
Yeah, soldiers screaming inanely. Yeah. I hate that.
Well, and to me, I mean, you mentioned something about Old Boy. I don't know what that's a reference to, but for me, the original hallway scene of this kind of fight scene is from Daredevil, and for the most part, I think animation is just as good as real TV or real movies. I shouldn't even say real TV, but live action. And I love that this show is animated. I do think that part of what made that hallway scene in Daredevil so incredible was that it was all one shot, and just all the kind of people going in and out of rooms and just the incredible act of choreography and all that, none of which is there in animation. Like, to create an animated hallway scene is so different. And so, yeah, but we'll see. We'll see if we get another one. We'll see. It might be that we love it.
I am sending you the YouTube clip for Criterion. They've got the old boy corridor fight scene. You have to watch it because it is the scene on which everything we've talked about is based.
Okay.
I have one more comment. Sorry, Matthew. One more I thought I had. I forgot that something I found really interesting is when he first gets the hologram of Maul, and they find out that the ISB wants all information immediately. The last we saw of Maul before all of his crime stuff, Palpatine was like, "I have a plan for you," and then let him go, and then Maul starts building his little empire with the Mandalorians, and he keeps slipping away, but clearly Palpatine wants him, whether he wants him dead or wants him as a puppet. I feel like at some point in this series, ISB. I don't know if we're necessarily going to get a Palpatine cameo, although it wouldn't surprise me. But I feel like ISB is going to get involved at some point. We're going to see some meeting at some point about why they want Maul or why they're so worried about Maul, because clearly he's still on the mind of Palpatine if all information has to go to the ISB.
Mm-hmm. Well, and one thing that we talked about a couple of episodes ago when we were doing the primer for this was how Palpatine specifically lets Maul live. And he says, you're going to be a useful tool for me.
Right.
And I think to the extent that Palpatine is aware of what's happening on this planet, it is exactly what he wants. Because, again, the more chaos and things like that happen, the more the people are going to say, oh, Empire, please come and take care of this, because we don't want to live with all this crime. So, I think this is and I think that's going to be the sad irony. Maul, and this is, again, more from the Legends canon that we talked about in that episode, he's not been trained to be a Sith Lord. He's been trained to be an attack dog. And he wants to be playing chess, but he's never really been given those skills. And I think the idea that he thinks he has this whole plan to take down Sidious, and he's actually doing exactly what Sidious wants him to me, that's the ultimate tragedy. That he really is that kind of the Greek tragedy with a tragic flaw,
And you think about his name, Darth Vader, Darth Father, Darth Tyrannus, Dark Tyrant, Darth Maul, literally attack dog. Go attack that. Go maul that.
Yeah, exactly.
And all the time, Darth Sidious is playing Candyland.
Pretty much. Everyone's playing checkers and chess, and Sidious is up there playing Candyland.
Insofar that Candyland is a completely deterministic game. When you sit down to play Candyland, it has already been decided who's going to win.
Is that true?
Yeah.
That's right.
Because you're drawing cards. The random aspect
it's pretty much tic-tac-toe.
Deck of cards that you never shuffle. So if you sit down to play Candyland and I look through the deck, I can predict who's going to win. I mean, I have to do it all in my head and stuff like that. Fair. But there's there's no decision making by the players. There's no
way to outwit the luck. It's all luck.
Yeah. It's all
like gambling. You teach kids gambling.
It is. That's why Vegas is so hot for Candyland.
Now, if only there was a podcast that talked about variance and how people don't understand that. I'm working on that podcast now. Paul and I will hopefully get kicking that off soon, either on this or another network. So we will see. All right. Well, thank you both so much. Thank you to our listeners. Please keep sending in feedback. Please keep sending in your thoughts. And we'll try and post some polls and stuff like that for people to respond to. Find out all the ways to follow us on the Star Wars Generations podcast website, which is, of course, part of the TruStory.fm family of podcasts. Pete does a bunch of great things on there. I'm on the Marvel Movie Minute with Pete. Pete also does a fantastic thing about ADHD, which I think a number of the characters in the show could probably benefit a lot from. Just all sorts of great stuff there. So please check all that out. TruStory.fm, theethicalpanda.com, and StarWarsGenerationspodcast.com. On behalf of myself, these two wonderful people, and Aaron, thank you all so much. We have spoken.
And stay classy, Janix.
Well, it probably needs to be stay jazzy, Janix. Just for the